What is up, party people? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jamila. This is JemilaBeReadin, because I do be reading. And today we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in March. So if you watched my previous wrap up, you know that February, it was a big slump. It was a miss for me. And I was still feeling a little slumpy going into March. And I just thought, you know what? Let me reread something that I know that I will love. Something that's a little propulsive. Something that's going to keep me reading. So I decided to do a reread of The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. I first read this book back in 2020 when it first came out, so it has been nearly 6 years since I read it. While I still remembered a lot of the larger plot points, a lot of the finer details were gone from my brain, so it was fun and exciting to read because I had forgotten a lot of things. This book is such an interesting book. This is a sci-fi kind of dystopian novel. We're following our main character, Kara, and she lives on, let's call it Earth Zero. And she is a traverser. So she works for this large tech company as a traverser, meaning she goes and travels to different known Earths to do research and gather data for this tech company. And in order to be a traverser, you have to have died on the planet or the other Earth that you're going to. Otherwise, it's gonna cause this huge reaction, and there's some blowback. So Kara is a particularly special traverser because she is dead on nearly all of the known Earths that this tech company is aware of. She is often utilized for these, I guess, missions or whatever. And so she ends up going to an Earth for, data collection, and something happens that leads to other things happening. And then she comes back and then realizes some other things, and then she's investigating some things, and it turns into a big thing. I know that doesn't really explain it, but truly, I think you should go into this and not knowing much because, the mystery aspect was honestly pretty good. It wasn't as shocking to me because I'm rereading it, but I just remember the first time I read it, I was gooped and gagged, okay? And honestly, I was still gagged a little bit. It was just nice, watching all of the pieces come together on a reread. I truly think this was so well put together. Kara is such an interesting character. She has lived a very hard life, and it's just so interesting to see how she navigates the world because of that. And then her relationship with her, I forget what she's called, but she's basically the one that navigates the traveling for her partner, I guess, Dell, and their relationship. It is sapphic, by the way, if that entices you even more. And it's just such interesting commentary on all of these tech companies and power and all of this stuff. It's so good. I had a great time rereading it. I don't know if I read it for the first time now that I would give it 5 stars, but I'm going to keep it at 5 stars because I truly think this was so well put together. If you're interested in a kind of sci-fi mystery thriller, definitely check this one out. So since I just reread it, I wanted to continue with this streak and actually go ahead and read the sequel, which is Those Beyond the Wall. I've seen some people say that this is not a sequel and you can read it as a standalone. I don't suggest that. I mean, you could, but it does follow characters from the previous book. They do show up, and knowing what happened is kind of integral to knowing what's going on in this book. But we are following a character that briefly shows up in the first book, what is her name? Mr. Scales. She's one of the runners for this group gang situation in Ashtown. I probably should have explained that with the first book, but basically there's Wiley City, which is this walled off super city where the tech company is located, because the earth is kind of uninhabitable. It's like walled off, and like they even change like the atmosphere and all of this stuff. And then Ashtown is like the poor town on the outskirts of the city where most of the black and brown people have ended up. And so there is like this dude, I'm blanking on his name, who kind of runs Ashtown, and his runners are his posse, and his followers, I guess, and Scales is one of his followers, or runners rather. And we're following her as the main character, which was just so interesting because she's in some ways similar to Kara, but in other ways very different. And this takes place also 10 years after the events of The Space Between Worlds. And we do see other familiar characters come back. And basically, there's some weird shit happening. So basically, one of the characters, like, kind of spontaneously dies in a really horrific way, and they're trying to figure out why that's happening. And it's also happening to people in Wiley City as well. So she's basically tasked with trying to figure out what is going on and what's causing this. Frankly, we could have gone without this book. It wasn't bad by any means, and I think the author's note like really brings clarity to the author's headspace while writing this. So I get that this was probably a really cathartic experience for them, but you know, I thought like plot and pacing wise, it was kind of all over the place. It was both too slow and too much happening at the same time. It didn't feel as propulsive as the first book. I thought it got a little convoluted at times, to the point where I felt a little bit confused by what was happening, and I'd often have to go back and read certain passages because I just was confused at how we got from point X to Z. So there was that. And then on top of that, like, thematically, I wasn't really sure. Like, the author's note I understand, but I just don't know that translated with this book and its commentary on violence. I don't mind violence as a means of resistance in certain situations. And I think that's kind of what this book was going for, but also like the violence that the runners and their leader was enacting on just everyday civilians of their own people, that just didn't really make sense to me. Ruling by fear. I just didn't really understand where this book was going thematically or what it was trying to say. I don't know. And it left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. So I honestly, like, if you're wondering whether or not to pick this up, you've read The Space Between Worlds, you enjoyed it, and you're wondering to pick this up, personally, I would say you're fine without it. If it intrigues you, definitely go ahead. It wasn't a bad experience. I ultimately landed on a 3 stars for this one. I just don't feel like it added anything to the original story or its themes, personally. I listened to an audiobook over the first, like, I want to say like 2 weeks of March, and that was Positive Obsession, The Life and Times of Octavia E. Butler by Susanna M. Morris. This final copy was gifted to me by the publisher, but I did listen to the audiobook that I got from my library on Libby. And honestly, I had a great time with this. Octavia Butler is one of my favorite authors, and so when I saw that this book was coming out, I knew I wanted to check this out eventually. It was so fascinating. It was really fascinating. I think what was really interesting about the way that this was structured is that it was kind of based, like, each part or chapter was kind of based on like a theme or point from one of her books, and then kind of like built off from there, which I really liked. I will say one thing that I feel like I wanted more of was like maybe had the author talk to people that knew Octavia Butler, maybe her contemporaries, or just people like in her life that are still around and would have been willing to talk about her. I think that piece of it was really missing here. The author used, I think, primarily journals from Octavia Butler that were donated, I think, to like the Pasadena Library, I want to say, and then other interviews and other research. But I did really feel like we were lacking a little bit of a personal component from people in her life. But otherwise, I really enjoyed this. I don't really have much to say. I feel like I learned a lot about Octavia Butler. It really made me think, like, truly there's not many people right now who's doing it like her. The extent that she went to do all of the research for her books, like, truly ain't no one doing it like her. Ain't no one doing it like her. I mean, the fact that she, like, you know, and it also made me a little sad. So many of her books particularly got popular like now, after her passing. And there's all of these adaptations that are coming out now, and Parable of the Sower finally became a New York Times bestseller in 2020. And it just, you know, it's sad that she missed out on more recognition than she had been receiving while she was alive. Yeah, so that that made me a little sad. But yeah, I just learned so much, and it just made me respect her even more as an author, and I wish she was still here. And then for the book club that I have with a few of my friends, we read The Wondrous Lives and Loves of Nella Carter by Brianni Wusu. A friend of mine, one of my friends was the one who had suggested this one, but I had also seen it. I can't remember where I saw it or who I saw talking about this book, but you know, I went into this with a little trepidation. I did. I was a little weary, and that's because it was comped a lot to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that truly that book disappointed me to my core. I just had so much hope going into that book. It had such an interesting premise. I have a whole standalone review video from a couple years back. If you want to go watch it, I'll have like a little card thing here, if you want to watch it. But this was comped a lot to it, and it sounds kind of similar in premise, and I was like, oh, I don't know. But what gave me a little bit of hope is that it was a Black author about a Black character who grew up enslaved. And so I thought maybe there would be more interesting commentary there. And while ultimately I do think that this was a better reading experience than The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I should say, I think in that old video and when I initially rated The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I gave it 3 stars. I would now probably give it a 2-star. But yeah, while I had a better experience with this book, it still, unfortunately, did not land for me. So let me explain what this book is about. It's following Nella Mae Carter. She is ill, some sort of plague that's spreading around, and she is quite literally about to die, and death comes to take her along into the afterlife, and she can see him, which is unusual because most people cannot see death, but she and the other women in her family have always been able to see him and kind of these supernatural things. So she talks with him, and he is intrigued by her, and they end up making a deal. Basically, he makes her immortal. He saves her life and makes her immortal, but she has to document the beauty of humanity because he's like, humans suck, bro. And she's like, actually, there's so much greatness in humanity. And so she will periodically throughout the rest of her many lives will meet up with death and talk, and she's also a writer, so she will like interview people and write about her experiences and her observations on humanity in various publications, and he's also reading it that way. And then they're meeting up, and he keeps allowing her to continue, I guess is convinced by her arguments about humanity. And then in present day, she meets a man. And she begins, you know, she's just like really feeling a lot of emotions and connections to him, and she decides to reveal this bargain and her life to this man. I forgot to mention that one of the rules of the bargain is that she cannot tell anybody about it, but she decides to tell him. And so it's kind of written in a way where she's like telling this story to him, and we're following gosh, how many? A few, maybe like 7 different relationships. And that's kind of like how this book is structured. And I didn't love that it was always centered around a relationship. There was one that it was centered around a friendship, which I did appreciate. But it was so repetitive. After the first few times, it just got really repetitive to me. And the person would inevitably die, and she would be so heartbroken, and then she almost loses her faith in humanity, but then doesn't, and then it rinse and repeat. And man, I wish I kept it. I got the library book, a physical library book from my library, and I had tabbed some things, and I wish I had screenshotted some of these sections, but I just remember there was one conversation that she was having with Death when she was living in New York, and they were overlooking like Central Park or some sort of neighborhood that's being gentrified, and Death was rightfully making the point about like the Black communities that were like forcibly removed from this community, and like indigenous genocide and all of that stuff. And then she goes like, do you take issue with, you know, what is it, like a larger bug eating a smaller bug, or like something like that? And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? It was just completely nonsensical, and I was like, this is weird. Why are you saying this? It was so strange. Really did not enjoy that. I just felt like all of the observations about humanity were so surface level, so uninteresting, and it just was so boring and repetitive. It read quickly, I will say. I read it a lot faster, and it went down a lot easier than when I was reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, hence why I'm rating it a little bit higher. But it was truly another disappointing experience, and I'm really doubting these like Faustian bargain, immortal life observations of humanity stories, because like no one has interesting observations on humanity, it seems like. I don't know. But I didn't like it. I gave it a 2.75 stars. I wouldn't recommend, but again, with anything I talk about here, if you feel the urge to read it, I ain't gonna stop you, and I can anyway, so. And then I read volumes 11 and 12 of Dawn to Dawn. I talked about reading that in my previous wrap-up. I'm not gonna get into it. It's just this like shonen manga series that is a mix of sci-fi and fantasy, and it continues to be a fun time. So there's that. I'm not rating those because I frankly have a hard time rating individual volumes of manga, but yeah, I'm enjoying it. That's all you need to know. All right, and then I buddy read The Dream Hotel by Layla Lalami. If you watched my previous video where I did like an ultimate book day with my friend Janelle, we talked about this book, and I also gave my like live thoughts. I inserted some vlog clips of me reading this and talking about my feelings, so I'm not going to get too into it. You can go watch that video for more thoughts. But The Dream Hotel is a kind of dystopian-ish literary fiction. We're following our main character, Sada, who is a, what does she do? She works in like archives or something like that. She's married. She recently had twin children, and she is coming back from a conference overseas. She's coming back to Los Angeles when she gets detained at the airport. In this version of the world, there is an agency called the Risk Assessment Agency, and this agency basically monitors everyone's risk assessment score, basically their risk of potentially committing a serious crime. And there's also a tech company, Dream something or another, where they can also see your dreams. The company is meant to like help people with their sleep issues, but unbeknownst to most people, they're also monitoring people's dreams and using that towards these risk assessment scores. So if you have a dream that is concerning, it's going to increase your score, I suppose. Scores above 500 are what are a concern for this agency. So for whatever reason, her score has gotten above a 500. She is not aware of this until she is getting detained and questioned at the airport, and they ultimately take her to some sort of retention facility. They tell her they're just going to hold her and monitor her for 30 days. They're very insistent in trying to differentiate this retention centers from actual like criminal arrests. She goes there. It's a whole situation. She has a lawyer. And they also believe that she is at risk of killing her husband. She has no idea why. And so we are just watching her in this retention facility. We also get some like past timeline situations, and then also some other POVs. What was supposed to be 30 days at this retention facility ends up being nearly a year. And yeah, we're basically just following her as she's navigating this situation, and knowing and learning about the other women in this retention facility. I would say for like the first half of this, I was really enjoying it. I really liked the writing throughout all of this. I thought it was pretty evenly paced. I liked the pacing. I found, even though it was pretty slow moving in classic lit fic form, I still found it to be a little bit propulsive, because I was like, what is happening? I just really wanted to learn more about her and this retention facility. Where it lost me was kind of the end portion of this book. It really ended in a whimper, like I said in my previous video. I feel like it kind of just lost the thread a little bit there. And also this book really felt on the nose for the most part, which I was fine with, which is why the ending confused me, because it was both on the nose and then also a little bit confused about what it was trying to do. And I thought, if you're already going to be like very apparent about what you're trying to say, like just really drive the message home at the end, but instead it just kind of fizzled out. So I didn't love that, but I would still give this one like I keep going back and forth between like a 3.5 and a 3.75. I would say probably a 3.75. I still think that this is definitely one you should check out. I think it has a lot of interesting things to say at times. And I'm very interested in checking out more from this author. And the final book that I read in March is a graphic novel, and that's The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. This was my my one contribution to the Trans Rights Readathon. I really enjoy the Trans Rights Readathon and always participate. It kind of floundered a little bit for me this year. I read another book for it, but I didn't finish it before March ended. So I'll talk about that in my April wrap up. But this is the one book that I got to finish within March in the Trans Rights Readathon. And it was cute. It was very, very cute. Following Prince Sebastian. He's like 16, I think, and his parents are trying to find him a bride, and he does not want a bride. And he ends up we're like kind of coming across this dressmaker named Frances, and she becomes his personal dressmaker and helps him with his secret alter ego, Lady Crystalia. And makes all of these beautiful gowns for her, and they go out on the town at night. This is a secret from his parents. Yeah. And then they kind of fall in love, and then other things happen. Not much happens, actually. And then his parents find out, but they are supportive, so that's great. This is definitely intended for a younger audience, and I think this would be great for a younger audience, especially like seeing like the acceptance from his parents. And yeah, it was cute. I liked the art. The fashion was great. I don't really have much to say. Like, I don't really know what to rate it. It's probably like a 3. I had a great time and I definitely recommend it. So there's that. All right. Those are all of the books that I read in March. As always, let me know what y'all have been reading, if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video, and I will catch y'all in the next one.